Welcome in. We have some people waiting for us. Tonight we're going to be talking with our new friend, Patty O'Neill Moss. How did I do?
You did great.
Awesome. Um, and we're going to talk all things Course in Miracles. But here's what I want to start off with. Um, you are a marriage and family therapist.
Yes.
Does spirituality inform your practice, or um, is it separate? That you're a
Yeah.
therapist?
It's a great question and absolutely informs my therapy. And that's a great way to put it because someone actually asked me once, I had a client ask me about, are you doing A Course in Miracles in my sessions? And I didn't know how to answer that question and what I came to is, well, it informs everything I do. I hope I am because uh, this is what I want to come through, but I'm not teaching A Course in Miracles. I'm just doing my best to live A Course in Miracles. And so my therapy comes from that. And it did even before I found the course, I would say. It just became so much easier to understand how that works once I found the course.
Right. I think that's an important distinction to make. That I'm not teaching you the course, but the course being the backdrop of our thinking process. That we're learning how to choose to think with the Holy Spirit. It's
Yeah.
obviously going to influence
Yeah.
how we approach it.
And I have to say, it's the easiest place for the Holy Spirit just to come through naturally because I don't have uh, I'm not trying to get anything from my clients. And so, therefore, it is in a lot of our relationships, we're not thinking that we're trying to get something, but whether it's attention, validation, whatever it is, that's just kind of a
Right.
natural thing that the ego does. And so, with therapy, it's much easier to just flow because I know I'm here just to help my clients heal and that is a gift for me and so it's healing for me too.
Now, therapy is a bit different than it used to be, where there was a um, maybe a little bit of a separation between the therapist and the client, maybe a bit of a dispassionate view that you didn't make a connection that I think therapists make now, that to heal, you have to approach them on a very deep level.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's all kinds of there's different therapeutic practices and yeah, that idea of sort of you're just this blank slate, that is kind of not bringing anything, which to me doesn't make sense. It never really did. Carl Rogers, when he was doing therapy, that was one of the things that we learned. But one of his tenets was unconditional positive regard, which to me is unconditional love. And so as a therapist, you also have your professional boundaries that are there for a purpose. And I think it's important to pay attention to the ethics and whatever boundaries there are meant to be. But
Right.
I love everyone. So I'm going to love my clients. I just may not, depending on the client, I may not express it in that way.
Sure.
But but that's really what I'm just loving them. And that's kind of the biggest, I think, the most important part of the therapy.
Um, Carl Rogers was one of the first in the positive psychology um,
Yes.
direction.
Yeah. And Virginia Satir, yes.
Oh, right. And they actually, Virginia Satir was a big model for NLP, neuro linguistic programming, family
Mhm.
counseling.
Yes.
Um, the people that they modeled NLP on, Milton Erickson and Virginia Satir, uh, what profound teachers they were. They brought things to a whole new level, uh, unheard of before.
Yeah, and Jung, I mean, that brought really looking at the unconscious, and even Freud. So Ken Wapnick, who was my teacher, and um, he was also a psychologist, and he was actually, at the time of his death, he was writing a book on Freud, which I was sad that he didn't get to finish that book, because no one else really, I don't think, could have done it. But one of the things that he talked about with Freud is that Freud's gift was that he taught us about defense mechanisms, and the ego is basically one defense mechanism. So repression, denial, all the things, and understanding that. So it's like spirituality and therapy intersect so much, because we're we're doing a form of therapy ourselves when we learn the difference between the ego that has all of these things that keeps it suffering. And that's what I'm doing with my clients, is I'm helping them see how their suffering is somewhat under their control, if they're able to look at things differently. Not completely, but somewhat.
Right. Is um in therapy nowadays, is Freud outdated or is he still relevant, do you think?
Uh, I I mean, I've never used Freud in therapy, I would say. So I don't think there's still psychoanalysis. Maybe there's still people that use some Freudian type things, but uh, yeah, I would say for the most part, it's not. I don't know anybody that uses
Right.
what Freud was doing, really.
It's interesting that uh Ken also said that he didn't think that the course could have come through without Freud.
Yes, exactly. Very important point. Yes.
Patty, you ready for a question?
Sure.
Um, if the world is a dream, who am I actually forgiving?
Mhm. I think that we're forgiving the whole ego thought system. So that's why we're not ever forgiving one particular person, because it's one thought system. So I think that's one of the things that really helped me, is to recognize I'm forgiving something that is in my mind as well, because we know it's one mind. We have a right mind, which is our true self, our spirit self, and then we have the ego, which is our so-called wrong mind, that's not even real. But for those that are sort of don't think in spiritual terms, it still is helpful to recognize the things that we're triggered by in someone else. If we can see a little bit of that in ourselves, it helps us understand, oh, well, if I can forgive them, then I can forgive myself. If I see someone as being greedy, then I can forgive the greed in me. If I see someone being cruel, I can forgive that in me. And obviously, we act out the ego in different degrees. So I think it's important to recognize that some manifestations of how the ego operates seems more hurtful
Hmm.
in form than others. And so, yes, you can say, that's why I will help my clients make a break from somebody. There's no point, if someone is mistreating you day after day, to just stay so you can continue to forgive.
You know what I love about therapists who are practitioners of A Course in Miracles? There's zero bypassing.
Yeah.
None.
Yes.
Nothing is shoved away. Nothing is ignored. Nothing is glossed over with a positive, um, forgive and everything's going to be fine. Sometimes you need to forgive and forgive and forgive and forgive, and it still hurts. Um,
Yes.
but we're not to judge that. Um, we're not to judge the outer form of forgiveness, are we?
No, because we don't even know we don't know how that's supposed to look. And if, say that, there's people that maybe there's someone that they feel like they can't forgive. I mean, who am I to say, I can't tell someone that they have to do that. It's just recognizing that at some point, to have your mind free of the resentment, then you can be willing, if you're having trouble forgiving somebody, if you just have the willingness, a little willingness, and then
Right.
we let the Holy Spirit do it for us.
Um, do you know Corinne Zupko?
No.
She wrote a wonderful book. She's a therapist as well and a course practitioner. And she wrote From Anxiety to Love, which is a great book. And she talks about a little willingness. And if you can't have that, can you have a willingness to have a little willingness? Um, and I love those uh, little concessions that we can make. It's we don't need to jump into this big forgiveness lesson that might not feel like you said, we might not be up for it yet. We might not be ready for it. And I don't think it's helpful as a course teacher student to say you must forgive this now. Or
Exactly.
we have another question for you if you want.
Sure.
How can you ensure that spiritual belief in miracles doesn't override clinical scientific diagnosis? Are there limits that biblical teachings cannot exceed when it comes to severe mental disorders? Might need to unpack that a little bit. You want to take the first part?
Uh, yeah, I think, and that is something I'm glad that question was asked because I think it's important. So I feel like, well, Ken Wapnick would talk about don't be a bliss ninny. So bliss ninny is basically a way of saying spiritual bypassing. So if you have severe trauma or, uh, you've got PTSD, or you have things that happen to you that are just, our bodies in the world, our bodies do hold on to memory, and our like brain chemistry changes based on things that happen to us, especially as children when the brain is developing. So I think that we have to first deal with any kind of addiction or trauma or something on this level before we can really uh, be at a place to just say, oh, just forgive. I mean, you have to, first of all, I always tell my clients, you've got to have compassion for yourself for what you went through. And whether it's, we can say as course students, oh, it's a dream, but that doesn't mean that you didn't feel that pain. And
Right.
so I think that it would be great if we didn't have to unpack any things from childhood, but that doesn't work. And so we'll repeat patterns because trauma gets reenacted, and we'll keep repeating it unless we have at least some healing around it, some understanding, some compassion for what we went through or for what others went through. And then that's where we need sometimes medication, or we need EMDR or some kind of therapy to help us get to the point where we can then deal with life on, I guess you could say, a higher vibration or a higher level.
Right.
But we can't skip steps.
We need to meet people where they are.
Yep.
So it might be a dream, but there can be a great deal of suffering in this dream.
Yes, exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
is there a role for plant medicine in therapy?
Absolutely. It's incredible that now they are finding, like with PTSD, some of the things that help with that. So I myself have done ayahuasca several times, and ayahuasca is sort of like a way to bring up all the ego. Uh, it brings your ego right into your awareness. There's no escaping it. So any of the defense mechanisms of denial, depression, like with ayahuasca, that it doesn't work. So that's not for everyone. Um, but what it does is it just brings up all of these things to look at, because we have to be able to look at it in some way. And I would never recommend that to somebody. I mean, that's not, as a therapist, I'm not going to do that. But I do feel like even cannabis or different types of mushrooms, things that people can use to just open their mind a bit, can be really healing. And like
Right.
everything else, it can also be misused. So it really, everything comes down to purpose.
You mentioned how it's a way of bringing the ego to the forefront. That can't be an accident, can it? That there's a particular plant that, if ingested the proper way, brings the ego to the forefront in order to be dealt with. That seems almost divinely planned in a way.
Absolutely. Especially because, like with ayahuasca, it's from two separate plants. And for those plants to come together to create this medicine. And one of the great things about ayahuasca is, if anybody's ever done it, it's very unpleasant. So it would really, most drugs can be pleasant, and so they can be used recreationally. And I suppose if someone could do that with ayahuasca, I mean, I find that amazing because I feel like it has this purpose, as you said, that I feel is divinely inspired. And if it's done, but like everything, if it's done appropriately with the purpose of healing and love and bringing the ego stuff to the surface to be able to let it go.
Um, do you kind of think that the modern therapist could sort of be a modern shaman? That you're leading people through that jungle of darkness into a brighter field of awareness?
Yes, absolutely.
I love that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And yeah, I love that, being a therapeutic shaman or a shamanistic therapist. I don't know, but
Shamanistic therapist. I like that even more. We have another
that's great.
question.
Uh-huh.
Uh, what would you tell someone who is a Course in Miracles student who feels very scared about the future, even though they feel the Holy Spirit is telling them to trust?
Mm. Just let it be okay to be scared. Because one of the things, once I think as course students, then we have this idea like, oh, okay, well, I'm supposed to either not feel this anymore. I'm not supposed to be afraid. I'm not supposed to be anxious. And whatever comes up, we just have to love ourselves through it. So if there's fear, then that's coming up for the intentions, and eventually let go of it. But for most of us, we have to do it very slowly, because as wonderful as it seems to unconditionally love and be free of the ego, it's terrifying because the ego doesn't, we don't really want to get rid of an identity. And a spiritualized ego doesn't work. So the only thing we can do is be willing to have that willingness to let the identity go. But that's going to bring up fear. So I don't think there's any way to go through this whole process unless, those there are those teachers that have that spontaneous awakening. But aside from that, that's why we have to go slowly, because fear will come up, and it'll come up about different things. And then we just love ourselves through it and go, okay, here's fear. Great. Fear is here for me to be able to get to the other side of it.
I sometimes wonder if those who've had the spontaneous awakenings um, are the best teachers because they haven't gone through the process of letting go of they maybe they miss that embodiment stage where
Mm.
they're letting go of layer after layer after layer to find themselves awakened uh,
Right.
instead of all of a sudden waking up. Because how do you guide people through the levels that you find yourself stuck in?
I think that's very true, because I feel that because of things I've been through, it has helped me understand more. And obviously, as a therapist, I can't, thank God, I haven't gone through everything that my clients have gone through. But because of me, having to go through this very slowly, and then having what Ken called ego backlash, because of course, there's no actual linear path, but as we move forward, let's say as we let go of the ego, more fear comes up, and then the ego goes from suspicious to vicious. So to not go through that process, to not understand the backlash of it, yeah, it would be maybe not. For me, I think I need that, because I still will think, well, what if I'm just in this awakened state all the time? Will I understand suffering the way I do now? And I think that I will. That's just an ego thought. Like, yeah, I think you've got this. I think you understand suffering. So it's
Right.
okay.
Um, our next question is: am I interacting with my partner, or am I interacting with a shadow figure from my past that I projected onto them?
Mm, mm. That's a very interesting question. The first thing that came to my mind is kind of both and neither. I mean, we're always interacting with ourselves in some way, but if you have a current partner who you recognize things from the past in that partner, which one of the awesome benefits of being a therapist is I get to see how this plays out in so many people. The reenactment of past trauma, because it keeps coming back around. So if a current partner has things that trigger past hurts, then it's a new opportunity to heal from the past through this present relationship. And so I think if the partner is not, maybe I'm having the same reactions I did, even though my partner isn't doing the same things that that person in the past did. So that's still my healing, whether I'm healing from things that they're actually doing that remind me of the past, or if it's just me. But either way, it's just an ego reenactment in us that is helpful to be able to heal from the past, because we need present things that come up to help us heal from the
Sure.
past. If anything's unresolved, it's going to come up. It just is.
Do you know Dove Fishman?
No.
One of the longest, he was a student of Ken as well. One of the longest students of the Course in Miracles, teacher, almost 50
Mm.
years, actually. He has a business card, and on it says, "Bless your triggers." Um, so, like I hear you saying, eh, we could analyze all kinds of stuff, but in the end, it all needs to be forgiven. It all needs to be healed.
Yes, exactly. And so, I mean, and I don't like when I get triggered, and I'll have to remind myself sometimes, okay, this is for my healing. This is because it, and I think most people have that experience. You're like, oh, I healed this thing. Fabulous. And then like 2 years later, it comes back up and it's like, damn it. I thought I was done with this one.
Right.
And it can be really frustrating. It's like, okay, I wasn't done.
And maybe even more so as a course student. I've forgiven, I've forgiven, I've forgiven. Shouldn't I be done?
Yeah.
Um, but you're done when you're done.
Yeah,
Who's to say
exactly.
when that's supposed to be?
Right.
I
But
just
we know we
read,
are because we know we're already home. And that's something I think that's still comforting to know that we've all already done whatever healing we need to do. But in terms of the illusion of time, it certainly feels better to be in a state of mind that is peaceful now
sure.
rather than later.
I just read actually right before you and I talked backstage something from Gary Bernard
Mm.
that the um, the lesson, the forgiveness lesson, might be the same. It might feel like you're forgiving the same thing over and over again, but the guilt is different. And I thought that
Mm.
was very profound because it's new layers of guilt
Yeah.
that's just taken a familiar form.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I think it's important to recognize guilt is really our guilt of the seeming separation is unbearable. So we aren't even aware that we have guilt, that we think we've separated from God. And yet we didn't. And yet it's so insidious. Like we don't know that we have guilt about that. Especially, it doesn't matter if you are an atheist or whatever your spiritual or religious training is, we're all dealing with guilt from the ego identity. And so for me, I was aware of, I mean, some of my first memories are of feeling guilty at like 3 years old. I'm like,
well,
how is that? And so that's actually really helpful to
right.
recognize that that was in my mind and I was aware of it since I was a small child. And then of
Sure.
course that has to be projected out until we're at a place where we can really start healing that.
Imagine that in that the close at the closest that we ever are to our original innocence is when we're a child, and even at that young age, we're still carrying around a sense of guilt.
Yes.
It's almost like we don't have a chance. That uh, we should come from the womb and enter therapy immediately.
Except, and one of the things when I was, so the foundation for A Course in Miracles was 45 minutes from my home. So I got to meet with Ken every week for two
Oh
and
wow.
a half years. Yeah. So every week we had a group with his secretary every Wednesday. And before the group, he would meet with students. And, and it would be like 5 minutes, but 5 minutes with Ken every week. I mean, what an incredible gift. So, and then I would call it his speed dating because he would kind of bounce from person to person, and he didn't spend much time, but he didn't need to. But I also had a 6 and an 8-year-old child at that time, and so sometimes, and there were weekend workshops, and so sometimes I would bring the kids. And every week when I would meet with Ken, he would give me 2 Oreos for my kids, and so
Nice.
I'd be like, here's cookies from Ken. So for 2 years of their childhood, 2.5, they always got cookies from Ken. And and I was talking to him about, I wanted to be able to teach them. And he's like, you can't teach a child A Course in Miracles. They have to develop their ego before they can dismantle it. So as you're saying, like, yeah, we can't stop that. And it wouldn't be right to try to stop that from happening. But it was
Right.
helpful because I'm like, how can I teach this to my kids? And all I can do is just be as loving as I can while also guiding and having boundaries. With children, we just have to understand that we come into this world believing that we're a separate self. And, we need to do that.
I think maybe as mindful parents, we can try to avoid adding to that already present guilt the best that we
Yeah.
can, and dealing with our own guilt. So maybe, all right, let me go back in time. Instead of saying when we leave the womb we need to enter therapy, when you first conceive a child, you should enter therapy. Um, and that way you're dealing with your own guilt and you're not adding
Right.
to child. Or maybe just
Absolutely.
pick up A Course in Miracles. Um,
Yes.
you ready for the next question?
Yep.
How do you apply the idea of the cycle of miracles, that reality is a reflection of our minds in cases of abuse? Doesn't it place the blame on the victim instead of holding the abuser accountable?
So if you see a miracle as a shift in perception, I don't think, well, again, we can't bypass if someone's abused. I don't think we're meant to pretend that that's not happening or that that's not hurtful or that that's how things are supposed to go. So, in terms of miracles, a shift in perception might be that this is the ego acting out, and neither role feels good. So almost every victim feels some sense of responsibility for them being a victim, which is one of the saddest things because especially that's where I think the course is a little tricky because as children and a child that's being abused, uh, oh, it's your dream, that's so not helpful. um, well, it's your dream, so you kind of created this because we don't know why some children are abused and some aren't. And I think, therefore, all we can do is just know we can't know why that's happening, but that we want to do what we can to prevent it and sort of get out of the victim victimizer role by saying, well, this is, the phrase hurt people. This is the
Right.
ego acting out on a child who certainly does not deserve that and is going to have to do a lot to heal that. And so, yeah, so I think the miracle is in being able to forgive it while also having compassion for oneself if you're the one that's been abused, and also having compassion for yourself if you were the one that abused, because both sides are very painful.
Well, um, This is off topic, by the way. This is from Cat and Jack. Um, she says, off topic, Patty's eyes are beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Sometimes, sometimes for a comment like that, you need to go off topic a bit. Uh,
Oh, that's sweet.
um, so, what came first for you, being a therapist or A Course in Miracles? And was there any discomfort in the language of the course with being a therapist then and now?
Yeah. So therapy came first. As a child, I knew I wanted to help people. And so I didn't know in what way I was going to do that. But I decided in college I wanted to be a therapist, and I went straight through. And then I was a licensed therapist at 26, which had its own set of issues. Because now I look back and people would, well, you don't have that much life experience. I mean, as an intern, I was counseling when I'm 23, 24 years old, which is kind of crazy to be thinking about now. So that came first. And most people, I came across the course, I think when I was in graduate school, didn't pick it up again until I went through a really painful divorce and then found the course, found Ken Wapnick. And so by that time, I'd been a therapist for a long time, but I'd also been a spiritual seeker for a long time. So when I found the course, I knew this was my path. And we can do whatever path resonates with us. And that's just been the one that's been uh, the most incredible for me. And it's not something you really want to dabble in because
Right.
it's just painful if you just dabble in it. And so, so the language didn't make me uncomfortable because of therapy. It made me uncomfortable because of the religious tones, because I've been in a fundamentalist Christian church in high school, which just increased my guilt and didn't feel helpful. And then, and also the masculine language. And that was a question that Ken would get a lot, and Ken's Jewish, and Helen, who took down the course, is an atheist. So the language is really helpful in undoing our concepts of what these things mean. And even the term God is very triggering for people. And
Right.
so it's been really helpful for me to uh, not be triggered by that anymore, because I know it's something to just see through, because the words are just symbols. And so we get to uh, they're symbols of symbols, and so we get to shift that in our mind to understand what the message really is. And if we get caught up in the language, then we're going to miss the whole thing.
Um, so in that background, you said a fundamental evangelical, and
Just a fundamentalist Christian church. Yeah.
you already had a sense of guilt coming into it.
Yeah.
Were you brought into it by your family, or was this something that you?
No, I did it to myself.
That's what I wanted to ask you. Why are we in general? Why were you in particular attracted to guilt? I mean, you already had it in you. Um, Instead of going the opposite, why do you think that we're attracted to that guilt? That we draw ourselves back into it?
Mm, why are we attracted to the guilt? I think that uh, we still want an identity. And this is important to understand, because as you go through this process, even if your identity is, I don't want to see myself this way anymore, but we'd rather see ourselves as a piece of shit than to not see ourselves at all.
Mm.
And so I think if you've had, uh, Ken talked about how, like with the crazy mad idea, when the world is made, and it's sort of like this, this oneness that's just divided into all these different parts, and maybe we fall further closer to the tree of, let's just call it the tree of knowledge. So if you have this spiritual kind of, maybe you haven't completely forgotten, so the guilt helps us not remember. And part of us doesn't want to remember because it's terrified of losing the identity. So I think if you're drawn to guilt, you're also drawn to, like, there's a threat to your identity. So it's not a bad thing because it's unbearable. So you're either going to project it out onto everything or you're going to find some way to unwind from it. And
Wow.
that's what I think I was trying to do. I was trying to unwind from it. And if I'm just good enough, because I always wanted to be a really good kid, if I'm just good enough, then I won't feel guilty anymore. And then I just kept feeling more and more guilty. So,
It's a pretty vicious cycle, isn't it?
yes,
So
yes.
how did you do it? How did you step away from it? And why?
Mm, yeah. Well, I went, I go to college, and then I think one of the beautiful things is you're exposed to all these different kind of spiritual practices. And so I just tried on some different things and new age kind of things, and still wanted to, uh, yeah, but it's like you're kind of in the world. I'm still trying to have fun and party and do all these things, but I also want to be, uh, I want to let go of the guilt, but I didn't really have the conscious awareness of that, and yet I still kept pursuing these spiritual things. And then Ken talked about this golden thread that goes through our life, and I just found that to be true. I would find some things that were off, but then I'd find some things that really resonated, and so I find something that resonated and just keep at it, and then yeah, and then I wasn't really devoted to one spiritual practice until I found A Course in Miracles. And then when Ken died in 2013, I didn't fully grieve it. I had little kids. I just sort of kept carrying on as if it wasn't such a huge thing in my life. And so for 7 years, I still knew the course was true, but I wasn't devoted to it. And it
Right.
was almost like I had an excuse because I would tell Ken everything. I'm like, if I'm going to talk to Ken, I'm going to be authentic and I'm going to tell him all my shit. And then I didn't have to confess anymore. It was like, and he never told me I had to do that. I just decided to do that. And he was the most non-judgmental, like just this being of light. And he was so funny. And so there was just this lightness that I got to experience. And it took me a decade to really bring that within. And that's it, because I felt guilty for, in a way, I kind of turning my back on it too. And so once I devoted myself again with the pandemic, everything being online, that kind of got me back into it to the extent of being really devoted. And since then, I don't forget it anymore.
So what was it about the course that made you say this? That after dabbling for a bit, when in other, new age belief systems and other practices, what was it about the course that reached out and said, "Okay, this is your path," and
Mm,
when you know, you know. There's little choice in the matter.
yeah. Uh, I think the experience, because I started experiencing times of peace, and so it's always the experience, and it doesn't help to study something if we don't practice it. So when I started practicing it, and I would have these times of peace, and I would have a clearer idea of what felt like the right thing for me to do, then I knew through my experience, like, this is working. It always worked. I mean, it's painful. You'll go, I don't think most people go through a lot of suffering after finding the course, because it does bring up all the stuff that's unhealed.
Right.
But I just knew. It was just like you said, it was a knowing, and having that example of Ken. I mean, I don't know without him. And now, you know, uh, I mean, I didn't talk about him that much. Now I just am just so grateful that I had that experience, that I have this, like, this inner, like, the inner knowing just keeps growing. And I'm just grateful to, I guess, having that living example really helped me. Like, if he can do it, I can do it.
Right.
I mean, it kind of was that kind of feeling. Like I wanted to be like him, and we're not meant to be like anyone else. And so it took me another decade to get to the point, because then I tried to follow other teachers, and at some point, that became painful too. Um, and so I recognized, this was just in the last year. I'm like, oh my God, I need to be my own teacher now. And I always want to look to other people because I don't know. I mean, the whole Course in Miracles is I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know the right answer. So I always will turn to other people to be inspired and to see if I'm getting off course. But now I feel like I'm my own, like my internal guidance is the Holy Spirit, and I now can rely on myself for that. I have that trust now that the Holy Spirit is really within me. So that's been really helpful.
Right. You know, uh, Ken has become my imaginary inner therapist, uh, popping in my mind uh, when I least expect it, but most need it, um, and offering gentle but sarcastic correction.
Yeah.
Um,
See,
and
exactly. That's what he does to this
um,
day.
it almost always comes back to when I find myself asking why. Why is this happening? Why am I doing this? And the answer is almost always the same, and it's always with a laugh, that it is because I'm concerning myself with effects and I haven't addressed the cause.
Mm,
And that if I want anything to ever change, um, I have to turn and look at the cause, and I have to forgive, um, and quit rearranging things and thinking it's going to be better. Um, always go back to the cause. Don't concern myself with the effects.
yes.
Um, Very fortunate for you to. I mean, you literally had the teacher of teachers.
Yes. And I didn't even know it at the time. It was so new to the course. And it's kind of this, yeah, what a blessing. And I would say, oh my God, that I'm so lucky that I happen to live near where he was at the time and all of that. And he would say, it, and I feel like it's really important for me to honor that, because that is such a blessing. And now, and during those years after he died, I wasn't thinking in that way, but I certainly do now, because, a couple of things that Ken said: just be normal and be
Right.
kind. And you talk a lot about kindness, which when you asked me to be on the show and I started listening to you, I'm like, oh, this is fabulous. He practices like I
Oh,
do.
thank you.
And not everybody does. Ken, as you said, he was sarcastic and very funny, and he would say, "Oh, Course in Miracles students are the worst." And of course, he's talking to a room of Course in Miracles students. So it's always so funny when he said that, because students would ask questions and they'd say, "Well, I was in this Course in Miracles group and they're debating this concept," and he's like, "Oh my God, what are you doing?" So it's just living it. And my classroom, because the world is our classroom, we don't have to be living anywhere separate from the world. We just go about our lives, and it doesn't matter what we're doing. We just do it with love, and we forgive, and then everything's our classroom.
The amazing thing is that I don't think anyone could talk the metaphysics or the psychology of the course the way Ken could. But in spite of all that, he boiled it down to the simplest things: be kind, cast no one out, forgive, and there you go.
Yes.
Really, forgiveness is a deep practice because the ego never wants to forgive. Kindness is a deep practice because the ego will negotiate kindness. Um, it's really, when we simplify it to that, it's
Yeah.
amazing.
And the other thing is that, and I hear this a lot from clients, they'll say, "Oh, I just wanted to murder this person, but I would never do that." And people think, "Oh, well, I would never do that, so it doesn't matter that I want to kill them." And then I will remind them, it does matter what's going on in your mind, because if you're believing your ego, then you are, uh, yeah, you're just projecting out your guilt. And so in kindness, it's not just acting kind, it's being kind in our mind and just catching ourselves when we're not being kind. Because most people have unkind thoughts. And then it's like, okay, I don't need to believe that thought. So we're not supposed to make ourselves feel guilty and double down on that. And Ken would say, when you judge, don't judge the judgment, because then you're just making it worse.
Right.
Just recognize that you judged, forgive yourself, and move on.
I always loved when he said that, even when you choose the ego. And
Yes.
he would say, it's okay that you chose the ego. Just know that you chose the ego. And like
Yeah.
you said, and then move on.
Yeah. But don't deny that you're choosing it, because one of the things, and one of the hardest things about A Course in Miracles is, I mean, in some of the passages in the Course are just some of the language. You're like, I mean, the hungry dogs of fear. You don't want to start studying A Course in Miracles with that, because it talks about the truth of how the ego is, and it is not pretty. And we have to see that in ourselves, that it's not pretty. And it's so much easier to see it out there, especially with the world now. I know myself and a lot of other people, including you, it's hard to see what's happening in the world and all the separation. And yet that's always been there. And there's been horrific things that have happened throughout history, because we have this collective ego that's acting out just as we individually act out the ego. It's the same ego. So it helps to meet whatever we see in the world that's ugly and horrific, meet it with love, meet it with compassion.
I was just talking about that um, just before we came on with someone.
Uh,
Um, so, is there, what's the role of a course student in a world of political divide, in a world of violence, when we might feel that we need to do something, and we also might feel that we're not supposed to do something? That as a course student, that uh, I'm supposed to be, I guess some might say, above, or some might say that uh, I'm just going to take this inner directive, and all of that.
yeah,
I'm not making anything wrong, but
but-
what's your view on
yeah.
how
I
should
think
a course student?
it's neither, I think, because we are meant to do whatever we're guided to do in the moment. So you may be guided. If you have the thought, I need to do something, and then you figure out what you're going to do, that most likely is coming from the ego. But if you're asking and praying, hey, if there's something I'm meant to do to help, please show me what I'm meant to do. And then it will come into the awareness what we're meant to do. So if it comes into your awareness that there's a protest that you want to go to, then go to the protest. Or if there's some supplies that you can give someone that is in need of food or care or whatever it is, we go with what our intuition tells us. But if we decide I'm not going to help because the world's not real, then we're just shutting off our guidance. So Ken used the example. He said, let's say you see someone, they're about to jump off a bridge and kill themselves. Student asked, well, what are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to help and try to stop them? And he said, you do whatever you feel is the most loving at that time. And then he said, maybe you go over and push them. So that is not really what would probably ever feel like the most loving thing. But,
Probably not.
yeah, but we all laughed because he was sarcastic. But the point is that we don't get to decide. And that's one of the trip ups, and one of the problems I've had with guidance is that if I'm guided today to go to a protest, that doesn't mean that now I'm going to protest.
Right.
I'm supposed to go today. I don't know what I'm supposed to do tomorrow. So, we just have to take it sometimes minute by minute, day by day, and just check in with the Holy Spirit. And if you don't resonate with the Holy Spirit, check in with your intuition. What feels the most loving?
I always love, and the guest Sean brought this up too. When we ask for that kind of guidance, we can also add, and please make it obvious. Um, doesn't need to be subtle.
Right.
And I love what you just said, that just because we're guided one moment to join a protest doesn't mean we need to adopt a label. Well, now I'm a protester. It
Yes.
meant that at that moment we were guided to protest, but tomorrow, the next day, we might be guided to sleep in and wake up and watch Saturday morning cartoons. Who knows? Um,
Yes. Yeah.
we do have another question. Um, how do you hold the vision of perfection for a couple when they are sitting on your couch in total despair?
I'm not sure exactly what they mean by that. Uh, that there's not, are they saying like there's nothing wrong? The vision of perfection. Do you think that's
Um,
what that means?
I think so. I think that that you're looking past the if they're the couple is on your there to see you for therapy,
Yeah.
and that you're holding a vision of them in their original perfection, but at the
Mm,
same time you're dealing with the outer despair.
yeah. Yeah. Well, I feel uh, that what's happening in the world needs to be addressed first. So I would want to help their despair in whatever way felt appropriate, and mostly because a lot of times, especially with a couple, and I do see more individuals than couples at this point, just because I just I just that just seems to be what I'm meant to do. But with couples, it often will feel like there's one person who, let's say, one person is abusive, or, well, if someone was abusive, then that's not appropriate for couples therapy. But let's just say that one person is critical and verbally abusive and all the things, narcissistic. So, and and then the other person seems more like the innocent one. I think it's important to recognize, the ego is working in both of them, but I'm also going to try to help them both change that pattern so that they're not reenacting which what probably has happened for each of them in the past. And yeah, just try to get to a point where they're not making the pain worse. And so I think alleviating suffering whenever we can comes first. And then just I have to do my best not to judge. And I don't want to buy into, oh, this person is the problem and this person is the victim, because then that's not seeing that it's all just, it's one ego. And I'm certainly going to try to help them each kind of not play that role anymore.
Right.
So I can see beyond it, and yet I'm not going to try to help them see beyond it. I'm going to address what's actually happening at first.
Sometimes that might be the most important thing I think we can do, because I think we've all been to a point in our lives where we just want to feel a little bit better.
Yeah.
Maybe not a lot, but maybe just a little bit, just enough to get through this painful hour or this painful day. Um,
Yeah.
have you heard of Dan Harris?
Mm-mm.
Who was a news correspondent, I think for ABC. He had a on-air panic attack for everyone in the world to see, and then it was played by every other news station over and over and over, um, leading to anxiety, because
Mm.
now he was afraid he had anxiety about having another panic attack on air, and he went
Yep.
to therapy. It didn't work. He did all kinds of stuff. Um, he finally learned meditation, Vipassana meditation, and he wrote a book about it. And the name of the book is 10% Happier. He's got a wonderful podcast, by the way, because he was asked in an
Oh.
interview, did meditation help? And he said, it made me about 10% happier. And in anxiety and panic attack, 10%, if we're at a point where we feel like we might do something drastic, 10% be enough to save our life, or to get through the day, or to have dinner with a loved one. 10% can be huge.
Yes. I love that. And that's sometimes all that I'm trying to do, because there's some clients who really want to heal their mind, and there's some clients that just want to feel a little better. And so I don't decide how that's going to look. I have to leave it up to the client. And maybe they won't get better at all. Maybe they don't want to get better because there is resistance to changing. And, that was something I had to go through too, where I had to say, okay, it's okay if this person doesn't heal. Maybe they're just not meant to.
Was that
And
hard for you?
so, what's that?
Was that hard for you to be able to let that go? Wanting,
Oh,
because I could
yes.
tell.
It depends. I when I was an intern, I had this client who ended up having, at the time it was multiple personality, but now it's called dissociative identity disorder, which is a very real thing. And it only happens, as far as I've ever seen, from severe traumatic child abuse, usually sexual, where the brain cannot hold all of that trauma in one place. So it separates out into different pathways. So as an intern, I got this client who'd been severely abused. And typically, uh, the clients don't know that they have it. And so it's a brilliant defense of the brain to be able to do that. Once I recognized, we figured out that she had it, my supervisors wanted me to, I was an intern. They're like, you need to get rid of her. We can't have, this is a liability to our practice. And I'm like, I cannot abandon her. So I consulted with other therapists. I learned about it. We had a psychiatrist on board. And then, of course, the Holy Spirit brought more clients with DID to me. And so that one, because it's so severe, I had a particular client with DID who I got to that point, I'd put so much time into it and, sessions twice a week for over a decade. And I got to this point, like, they might not heal and I need to be okay with that. And so once I, let go of that, it improved. And so I think, there's things that, we don't know what's meant to happen. And so, uh, yeah, so I also had a situation where I had, someone in a very abusive relationship. I'm like, oh, thank God they got out, and I would point out the things that this person had told me about wanting to get out, and then they get out and they're absolutely miserable. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I thought that they would be happier if they got out of this marriage, and they're not. So that also was helpful because I'm like, I don't know what people are meant to do. And as soon as I think I know, I'm losing what maybe I'm meant to do.
Is this my my inner therapist Kenneth Wapnick is coming out, and is this is this dealing with effects, um, or are are you able to get through working with as a therapist? Are you able to get to the cause, um,
Mm.
and heal, or do you think that we're maybe just making people's effects feel better?
And it depends on what is meant to happen, I think, because I talk to most of my clients about the ego, and just, I think that most people can have a general understanding of the ego versus the right mind. And the correct use of judgment is whether or not I'm at peace. So I don't feel like I'm just putting a band aid on things, because I do have clients that do some real healing. Like, they understand that the ego identity isn't them. They understand how to kind of tap into their true self, as
Right.
I would call it. And so I would say that happens a lot more than, those that maybe only feel 10% better
Right.
and haven't really made a shift. But that's okay, because it's not up for me to decide.
I get the feeling that your kindness takes you very far as a healer.
Yeah, I have to plug you in. But yes, I feel like I think being non-judgmental, that's always, I mean, I judge, the ego judges, but I don't feel real attached to judgment. That's not one of my top ego holds, which is very helpful as a therapist. So I think not judging and being kind is very healing for people, especially like those DID clients that I'm talking about, to have that consistent love, and I have a couple clients that I've told them, I'm never abandoning you, and as a therapist, you usually have the end of therapy. Well, if therapy ends, then I will still check in on them and care about them because that's what I feel I'm meant to do. I obviously can't do that with everyone, but there's certain almost like assignments I feel that I've been given. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I look at it.
Do you think that not every therapist some therapists are great at therapy, but they're not necessarily a healer? And you think that maybe because I get the sense that you are a healer therapist, and that brings something wholly different to the game.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope so. I want to be a healer. I don't want to just, I guess that's because I want to heal my own mind. So I'd like to share that also with my clients because it's all, I mean, I learned so much from my clients. So you kind of get that sense too of, oh, this is my healing. And so, yes. So I do see that. Yeah. And I think that, and there's therapists that can do harm, obviously. I mean, we
Sure.
have really strong ethics, which I think is very important, like dual relationships, because you have this intimacy. And of course, uh, the, the miracle impulses that are not actually miracles where people then, like, obviously you're not allowed to have sexual relationships, and therapists that do that can cause a tremendous amount of harm. So I don't think every therapist is a healer or even helpful, but I think most have the intention of that, at least.
Um, we have a question that ties into one of the beginning things that you were saying about the ego. Um, does that mean you're working on the couple's joint ego, which works on their individual egos?
Hmm. Hmm. I mean, it's kind of all the same, but yes, I think I'm. Well, it's sort of because I'm still dealing with them as two separate people because that's kind of the only way to do therapy. But then there's the relationship, which is a separate entity within within this framework. And so, yeah, I think it's working with both. I think the healing comes from the relationship can't heal with each person if each person doesn't heal. A lot of times there will be one person that wants to heal and the other doesn't, and then the relationship can't heal if both people aren't committed to it. So that's probably one of the other things that I don't particularly love about couples therapy is that you don't have the same commitment from two people. You have one
Mhm.
person, the level of, and the commitment can change from week to week, but a lot of times one person will come into therapy with their partner because they're dragged in and they don't really want to do therapy, or they know they want to leave the relationship but they just haven't said it, and so then there's not a lot to do. I guess there needs to be the buy-in of both. So that's a good question because it's got to be both people are working toward getting through their whatever their ego stuff is, and then the relationship can be healed as well.
So, Patty, what's your role in your own healing as you are healing others? The unhealed healer, I'm thinking of that term came to mind from the course. That
Yeah.
um, are you seeing your own healing potential as you're helping others heal?
Yeah. And there's most of the time I am able to, something will trigger. Like I most of the time I'm peaceful, but if I get triggered, then I know, okay, this is something that's unhealed in my own mind. So this is something for me to work on myself. So I will use, if I'm uncomfortable in a session and there's something unhealed in my mind, sometimes anger doesn't bug me so much, but contempt really bothers me. So if somebody has contempt in a session, it it triggers. So that's something unhealed in my own mind that I still need to work through, because it's not that we don't notice things in other people, but when the mind's healed, you don't have a reaction to it. You're still peaceful. So, the other thing that's important is that uh, most of the time I'm present, I'm engaged. But if, let's just say, something in my life really difficult happened, like going through a divorce as a marriage and family therapist is not fun. And
Right.
so, I mean, I was not at peace for a lot of those sessions. And I would just have to pray before the session, just, okay, just help me be helpful, even though I know I'm not in a good state of mind, but hopefully this can come through me anyway. And it would, but it would be really hard. Like most of the time therapy isn't hard for me, but if I'm not at peace, then when we're not at peace, everything's hard.
When you were going through your divorce, um, here's when I was going through. I was a caregiver for my father in his final years, um, and I found myself suffering anxiety, panic attacks, insomnia, and part of my uh, yoga practice, I teach. I'm a meditation teacher, and I help people navigate through anxiety with breath work. Um, I found that I was suffering not only anxiety and panic attacks and insomnia, but imposter syndrome. How could it be helping and guiding people if I'm suffering the very same things that I'm supposed to be guiding them through? When you were going through your divorce, did you ever get that sense of um, how, what kind of therapist am I if I can't even fix my own marriage? Um,
Uh, Not kind of, but it played out a little differently. It was more, my choice in partners. Um, so yeah, I had, there's like shame around, uh, the choices that I made, and not only my partner, but just the dysfunction of the relationship. Like I know, it's like that I know better feeling. I know
right.
better than to be in this. And yet I was. And so, uh, and I think sometimes I would, um, have this sense, because it's all like in 2010 when I met Ken, my husband left, my dad died, and my dog died in
Oh, wow.
6 months. So it was like all this stuff, and then I'm doing therapy, and I have two little kids. So uh, a lot of times I go into the session and be like, okay, I know I feel way worse than my client does right now, and I'm supposed to help them. So I did have a hard time feeling like I could be helpful when I kind of felt like I was in a worse place mentally at that
Right.
moment.
How did
Yeah.
you navigate through that?
One day at a time. I
Yeah.
just kept, just showing up the best I could. And fortunately, it really was motivating though. I had a point where I'm like, I have to feel better, because for one, I don't want to mess up my kids, and I want to be a healer. I want to be helpful. So, I mean, we always have to heal ourselves. So I just kept working on healing myself and understanding, um, my part in what had happened, and really looking at it and undoing the guilt of it and coming to a better place. Because then it's also like, well, if I can do it, they can do it. Just like
Sure.
I would think about Ken.
I'm glad that you said I just wanted to feel better because that can take us pretty far. Just wanting to feel better, recognizing I'm not okay. I mean, that's the whole basis of the course, isn't it? That
Yeah.
I don't like the way I feel, and I'd like to feel better. And I have this little willingness that I can feel better.
Yeah. And, the hard thing is, okay, I have to feel better in spite of what's happening in the world. I think that's where a lot of people get caught. And, I'll have clients, it's like, well, I can't feel better because this is happening and that happening and this is happening. And so I felt like that. I felt like, how am I going to raise my kids with this person that doesn't want to talk to me? My kid's dad didn't want to have anything to do with me, but he had to. And so it was really painful. And I remember being at a Course in Miracles meeting, like, how am I supposed to do this for the next 10 years, until they grow up? I just, and, you know, while I'm saying this, I know that it's not really real and it's my dream, and so I knew all the metaphysics, but that didn't change how it felt at the time.
Right.
And yet, that was what my journey, I don't know why. We don't know why it goes the way we don't know why it's supposed to go the way it's supposed to go. But, it certainly didn't, in most of our lives, they don't fit the vision of how we think it's going to go. But
Sure.
doesn't matter. It's still, that's where I was so grateful because, Ken would just help me. He was very good about the specifics. There's teachers that don't want to deal in specifics, and I needed that. He would tell me, oh, yeah, just let them go. Let your kids go with their dad. You can't protect them from their dad. I mean, he would say things that were so helpful. And, and I was fortunate that my kid's dad was a good dad. He tried not to take stuff out on them. And I really appreciated that. So I just found gratitude. I just found things to be grateful for. And
Do
if
you
that's one thing that I was always grateful for, I could always say, okay, he's doing his best to be a good dad.
right?
So, just, this is all for your healing of your mind, and just appreciate what you can appreciate.
Do you find it helpful to know that the script is written,
uh,
or
no, not really.
frustrating?
Well, so it's funny because I had this conversation with a friend who may even be on here. I don't know, but we had this debate about the script is written because the way I learned it and what Ken told me is, it's like all these possibilities are rolled out, and we're at the time there were DVDs. So he would say, we're choosing which DVD we review.
Right.
So it's all happened, but that doesn't mean that we don't have a choice of, are we listening to the ego or the Holy Spirit? Because we're still going to make different choices. So the script is written doesn't mean that I don't have a choice whether or not I'm going to the store after this meeting or not. Um, it just means that the ego might be telling me something and the Holy Spirit's telling me something else. And what am I listening to? And then the play might play out differently depending on which scenario I decide to review. And so that was helpful because, like, okay, I'm reviewing what's already gone by, but I still can have I can have a happier life if I'm listening to the Holy Spirit. And I have chosen the ego plenty of times and suffered. Could I have chosen differently? Maybe not, but I can certainly choose differently now. So now I can choose differently based on what feels the most loving. And then, I think the script is written is part of that is to remind us that we're already home, that we're already one with God, and we don't have to worry about what happens because we're going to be okay no matter what.
I take a lot of comfort from that as well. That we are literally reviewing what's already occurred uh, right now. But of course, we're caught up in the review so deeply that we don't know that we're caught up in the review. Um, but there's a lot of comfort to knowing that I'm already home, and I can remember it. I can wake up to that fact just by forgiving, just by being kind, um, daily.
Yeah.
I want to touch base on something you said about triggers. That um, we might still get triggered, but we can have a different response to those triggers. Because a lot of times we either want to one eliminate the trigger entirely or avoid it. I want to be places where I'm not triggered, but of course it's going to follow you as long as you have that trigger. It's going to find
Yeah.
you.
Right.
So we don't need to do this deep process of trying to get rid of triggers, though, do we?
Yeah, no, we don't want to get rid of triggers. On the other hand, we don't need to reenact something if we know it's triggering and it's not helpful. Like I was saying earlier about being in a situation, if you're around someone who's abusive, well, like the course says, the thing to do when you're the thing to do in the desert is leave, so we don't need to stay in a triggering environment if we feel like we're meant to go. But on the other hand, when triggers come up, then Yeah, that's one that I want to get to the point where I really appreciate it. Now I still kind of have a, oh crap, here's this thing.
Right,
But I do appreciate that it's coming into my consciousness because I want to, I'd love to just be able to let them all go. But we got to deal in the specifics before we can generalize to everything and everyone.
right. So it really is a classroom, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And we never it's and the fun part of the classroom is we never know what we're meant to learn.
Right,
Um, I started doing a prison ministry about a year ago, and so I go. It happened to be um, located in Ohio, so I go to a couple different prisons in Ohio a couple times a year and visit inmates. And these are inmates who have long sentences. Some of them have, they have some. There's some who have killed somebody, and being with them has been such a gift because talk about guilt. If someone comes to a point where they're open to a course in miracles and they've killed someone, like you have to forgive yourself without, and that's a tricky thing because forgiving ourselves doesn't mean that we say, oh, no big deal. And there was a consequence to that. There's a lot of consequences to that,
sure.
but that's been a really great classroom for me because uh, it's helpful uh, to view things from their level. The course talks a lot about being in prison, and then I'm dealing with people that are actually in prison. And one in particular, he didn't do the crime he was accused of, and he got the worst sentence because the person he was with shot a police officer. The police officer survived, but this is Ohio, and they threw the book at him. And he was 19 when he went in. He's 39. No, he just turned 40. But it's a different thing. You're in prison, you get a 51-year sentence for something you didn't do. You had no idea that was going down. You had nothing to do with it. And so if, you know, if I came in there and said, well, the script is written, this is what was meant to happen, that would not be helpful. What I can say is you need to have a ton of compassion for yourself because this sucks. On the other hand, he has this ability to find joy. He started finding ways to be happy in prison. And it's such a wonderful thing to see. And as soon as he did that, it was like this snowball effect. He started feeding these feral cats, and then he found yoga, and then these Course in Miracles people come in, and it just is this beautiful story. And I'm still trying to help him get out, but
Right.
it's just interesting. Like, being in prison, there's triggers for those guys and women every day. Someone's talking down to them. Someone is usually mistreating them. There's anger and negativity. So that's an advanced classroom. So sometimes I think, the worse the situation, the more advanced your classroom is, and you just do your best.
Um, that story reminded me of Viktor Frankl. Um,
Yes.
and you can find meaning. You truly can find meaning wherever you are and whatever the circumstances and situation might be.
Yes.
Speaking of Viktor Frankl, we talked about Kenneth Wapnick being such a huge figure in your course background. Um, Therapeutically speaking, who were your role models? Who were the ones that you just have such an impact on your own practice as a therapist?
Hmm. I don't really have one. I never had therapists that I really felt, oh, that's the way I want to do therapy. And so I sort of, I followed the protocols and everything else, but I did, the ones that I think Virginia Satir and Carl Rogers were the closest to how I wanted to do therapy because that was all about the unconditional love and really just being present and connecting and letting the relationship be healing in and of itself.
Nice. I like that. Um, so we're closing in on an hour and a half. Uh,
Really?
yeah.
Wow.
Um, for me, when I'm talking to someone like you, time flies when I'm just getting all these great answers. And we had some great questions from a lot in the
Yes.
chat. But I wanted to know, so what? How does the Course in Miracles these days play out through your life? What is
Mm,
your? Let's not say practice, but if you want to say practice, that's fine too.
yeah. So, one of the things I started doing with the prison ministry is I started sending a commentary of the daily lesson last year. So, I did it all year and I would get up early in order to do it. So, I would just read the lesson and then I would just write whatever came to my mind and I would send it. And you got to, I had to send them all separately, but to 12 or so inmates that were interested. And that became a big part of my practice because I started my day doing that. And so, sometimes still I'll wake up in a bad mood. I don't know why. I just am not in the best mood. And then I do that and it shifts because I have to be in my right mind to do that. So I'll read the lesson and I'll be like, I don't know what I'm going to say. And then I'll just start typing away and I only have, it's 1,500 characters. So often I have to cut down what I say. So that's become a big part of my practice. And then this year I'm doing the text. So I'm doing like 2 pages a day and then I send them a commentary on the text. So that is the main part of what I do. I also have a group that I do, and I can give you my email if anyone wants to email me about it. But it's just a Course in Miracles group where there's 6 or 7 of us that just talk about whatever miracles we've experienced for the week. It's Tuesday mornings, Pacific Standard Time, and we talk about any miracles we've had and we talk about any ego blocks. So what I do is I try to look at where I'm blocked and put that on the altar or let it go and then come back to peace. And so that's part of what I do. And then just joining with different students is helpful because A Course in Miracles is a self-study. So you don't need a group. But for me, the support and being around like-minded people is so helpful. And now I don't ever forget. I mean, I would go a long time without even thinking about it. And now it's always on my mind because I always know if I'm not at peace, I'm in my ego. And so then I've got to go through, forgiving whatever it is that I seem to be seeing as a problem.
Right.
So it's kind of a minute by minute, just noticing if I'm at peace, and if I'm not, then okay, let's let's deal with this by either forgiving it. Sometimes we're not ready. Sometimes if something's stuck and you don't feel like you can get out of a feeling, anger especially, that's where, just coming back to, okay, I need to accept that I'm not ready to let this go yet. And so I'm just going to be patient with myself and just keep asking for help. And I do a lot of either asking for help. Ken said you could do A Course in Miracles in 2 lessons, lesson 5 and lesson 34. I can see peace instead of this, and I'm never upset for the reason I think. So that's a real pisser when you're upset. Oh, I can see peace instead of this. And you're like, really? But it helps. So yeah. So I just do my best to bring my mind back as quickly as possible.
I love that, and
That was a
especially
long answer to a simple question.
you know, hey, we're on air, and I'm a professional content creator. So you just gave me wonderful content uh, that is going to be used, especially the lesson 5 and 34, because I love those suggestions. I was mentioning David Fishman. He uses lesson 25 as his personal mantra. I don't know what anything is for. Um, and he was doing, for those who've been through the workbook several times, just having them work on the review lessons of 201 to or
Mm,
200 to 220,
yeah.
just those reviews. And I've been doing that, and I find it. I've been doing the course for a long time. I love the holographic nature that sometimes you can you just need one thing and it reveals the entirety of the course to you.
Yes. And even so, you mentioned in an episode that every morning you say thank you. And I'm like,
Yes.
oh, that's brilliant. So I started doing that because, as I said, sometimes I don't wake up peaceful. So I'm like, oh, I'm just going to say thank you. And so little things that we hear from each other can be so incredibly helpful in just getting our, just bringing our mind to peace
For,
and
for
play. I love to play and have fun. So maybe sometimes the ego can overdo it on those things, but I really think it's important to laugh and also to I do my best not to take things too seriously because as soon as we take things seriously, it's so easy for the ego to then go to town.
That's how we find ourselves here. We took that tiny mad idea
Yes,
seriously.
seriously.
Um, and laughter is a ticket home.
Yes.
I'm so happy to hear that you heard that gratitude part. To thank you. Um, that's been a mainstay, and I
Mhm.
don't even know why I started it in the '80s. And I was a very grumpy, uh, grateful practitioner. That I would say it, and I'm going to say it, but I don't like it, and I'm not grateful for anything, but I'm going to say it. Um,
Mhm.
and I went through a very long decade, it seemed like longer than 10 years, where I was attempting to drip myself into oblivion, and I did a pretty good job. Um, but I still said thank you every morning.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and again, I didn't want to, but something was working. This is all through the '90s. I started meditating, and I'd meditated earlier, but I got very serious about it. Um, and I started picking up A Course in Miracles. I'd put it aside and I'd pick it up. I was planting seeds, and somewhere in that drunken haze, um, I didn't quite want to be so oblivious anymore. Um, the greatest thing in the world happened to me. I was pulled over drinking and driving by an off-duty state trooper, and I saw my choices very clear. That if I could continue the way I was going, and it was going to end in tragedy, maybe not that night or the next night, but eventually and probably soon. Or I could go whatever this mystery of sobriety was. I didn't know what I was going to do, how it was going to unfold, but I knew that I could choose sobriety. And when the police officer asked me to roll down my window and he said, "Sir, have you been drinking?" And I gave the most honest answer I could think of, yes, I'm never going to drink again now. And 27 years now. That'll be 27 coming up.
Wow. And that just shows you the power of the mind too, that you made that choice. You decided in that moment and then didn't go back on it. And, I mean, we can have our slip ups and that's okay. But you were ready. And that's a great story. I love that. Did you end up getting a DUI or did he let you go?
I did. I got a DUI. Um, and it was, again, it saved my life. More
Mhm.
importantly, it probably saved other people's lives.
Yeah.
And I'm still forgiving myself for uh, the mess that I caused and the danger that I put people through. I still wake up, not as often, um, in a cold sweat, my hands clenched as if I have a steering wheel. Um, and I will literally wake up in this position. Um, and but I'm working on it. If life is a classroom, I'm giving myself a steady C plus uh,
Better
right
than
now.
average, just a little, but
Just
better.
and that's not too bad. C plus is not too bad. There was times in high school when I would have done anything to get a C plus. So you mentioned
Oh,
communities, and I'm not in a um, course community, but I have the wonderful opportunity of talking to people like you, um, and that does wonders for me. I'm at the end of this conversation with you personally. I'm in a different place than when we started. Um, I might be after talking to you. I might be inching towards a B in my classroom. So I you truly are a healer, and I
Mm,
appreciate everything about this conversation.
thank you. I do too. And yeah, and we're all in the same community. I mean, that's been something I've wanted so badly, to be in a community, and then this invitation to be on this podcast, just yeah, it's just been such a blessing. And as I told you before we met, I made a new friend. So I'm just delighted with the whole thing. And I appreciate everyone that's been on here and asked such great questions. And yeah, just sending everyone all kinds of love.
Um, Open door policy. Anytime you want to come back and have a conversation, or maybe if you ever want to do just a pure question and answer session. And also, before we close up for good, any any big things happening that you want to share? Anything that uh, that talk about your prison project or anything that you want to? Oh, by the way, someone said I wanted to read that to you and I forgot that a prison prison ministry is badass. Um, I thought I thought you should know that there's someone in the conversation right now that appreciates the fact that you're a badass.
Well, thank you. I actually, that's funny because one of the things I've been an athlete, a triathlete for a lot of years. And then, you go through the whole concept of that. And I do a lot of endurance cycling and stuff like that. And so being a badass was always really important. But, now I just love it. And so I just do it for the joy of it. But, I still like to, you know, it's just fun for me. I like to see what I can do just for
Right.
fun, not to prove anything. But I appreciate that question. If anybody does feel compelled, some of the inmates don't have a lot of contact with people, so if anybody wants to message inmates, I can tell you a couple people that I think might appreciate that. So that's one thing. Yeah, so I will shoot you my email so
Sure.
you could let people know if anybody wants to reach out. And yeah, and then that's about it. And I have my Tuesday group that I'll also give the information in case anybody's interested in that. And yeah, and I'm just grateful to be here, and I'd love to come back. So
Sure.
I kind of feel like at some point, I feel like we might do this again in whatever way, and that'd be great.
I want to point out that people can't tell now, but when I look at your Facebook photos, you're buff. You, you're literally you're not just a prison ministry badass. You're actually a badass. Um, so I was an ultra runner for about a decade, a little over a decade, um, and competed in a whole bunch of stuff as well. But
Ah, yes.
I
See, that's one of the things we connect on. It's just a really fun. It's a fun way to push yourself in a way that's not, you know, I have an addictive personality, and so doing something healthy that I enjoy, it kind of fills that over. I try not to overdo it, but it sort of fulfills something that could be unhealthy, and I can channel it in a healthier way.
right. It's always funny when I hear a triathlete say, "I try not to overdo it." I just, I just swam and I just biked and I just ran a marathon, but I try not to overdo it.
Yeah, actually, I did a Ironman Lake Placid many, many years ago before I had kids, and my daughter is going to be doing it this summer. So it's pretty cool. So I get to go with my daughter, and she's going to be doing an Ironman, and I get to
Oh,
cheer
nice.
her on. And I know I'll be a little like, oh, I'm spectating, I'm not doing it, but yeah, it'll be really fun.
Mark Allen is a little bit of a personal hero for me. Maybe the greatest triathlete ever, and his training changed, and he started winning the big stuff when he met a shaman and started working with a
Oh, Mark
shaman.
Allen. Did you say Mark Allen?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I love that. And I knew Dave Scott. Dave Scott is also, one of the phenomenal uh yeah, athletes, and just yeah, it's just inspiring. But yeah, Mark Allen beat Dave Scott after he had that shaman interaction, I think. So,
Yeah.
he had God on his side, I guess.
And oh, I'm training with Foam Alphatone, doing
Oh,
that the low heart rate training.
yes. Cool.
Yeah. So next time we talk, we're going to add in some endurance conversations uh,
Sweet.
as
Yes.
well.
Love it.
So I'm going to let you go. We yeah, we're over an hour and a half with literally a brilliant conversation from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who joined. So thank you.
Take care, my friend.
Bye. Take care.